Hey, I'm Ophi from the AstroTwins. Welcome to STARSTRUCK with Colin Bedell from Queer Cosmos. Colin.
Hello.
My beloved Gemini, opposite sign,
That's
as you
right.
always like to say.
That's right.
So we are going to be talking today about something happening in 2020 when the North Node, which is our collective karma and destiny, moving into Gemini, your sign.
That's right.
Which
That's
means the
right.
South Node will be in Sagittarius.
Your
my
sun sign.
Who better to talk about this?
That's true.
And what
Then the
that-
signs that certainly know how to talk.
Exactly.
Us too.
So the world is going to be going through a metamorphosis of sorts around communication and relating.
That's
and the way we include each other. And so we're going to talk about
Yes.
what that's going to mean for relationships of all stripes.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Because I think that what's happening right now is that the relationship model is just going through an enormous renovation, right? We're asking significant questions related to, does your job matter more? When do we have kids? When should we do this? When should we do that? Do you want to live here? Do you want to live there? Does your mom have to move in with me? What about your credit score? There are serious questions that we all need to start asking and really meaningful conversations that need to be negotiated. And because the North Node is moving into Gemini, which is the third sign of the zodiac, and they are two people that appear in connection, we want to remember that Gemini is technically the introduction of communication skills and relational intelligence in astrology. So the North Node moving into this sign is going to give each and every one of us the opportunity to really flex those muscles and learn how to do it.
Yeah, nice. So, you know, you being a Gemini, you always have the best words and phrases. Relational intelligence. So,
Esther Perel, baby.
okay,
That's
I'm
where
going to
I got that
ask you
from.
to define that. And also, you have a new book.
I do.
Queer Cosmos.
Yes, I do.
From
Yes.
Cleus Press.
That's right.
Which is about astrology and relationships. So
Yes.
tell us a little bit about it.
Sure. So, well, relational intelligence is really just essentially the bottom line now for a meaningful life, for efficiency at work, and for really combating the epidemic of loneliness, which is currently the #1 public health crisis in the United States and in other parts of the world. So relational intelligence is the way that we can understand the existential world of another human being through communication skills, through our observation as well, and through mirroring, validation, empathy, the way that we straddle the fundamental sets of human needs that we all have, which are love and desire. So this is all the research done forth by Esther Perel, John Gottman, and others. And what relational intelligence allows us to do is calibrate between trust and surrender, freedom and closeness, adventure, stability. We all want these things in relationships, but we don't often know how to ask for it. We don't often know how to negotiate. We don't know how to calibrate. We don't know how to manage this paradox. And again, Gemini, the North Node moving into Gemini, the sign of the paradox. They were Castor and Pollux. They were the mythological twins. One was immortal, the other one wasn't. So we're constantly seeing the law of opposites, the polarity, the paradox in relationship, in this sign, in our culture. And I did explore that in my book, Queer Cosmos, because in the second half of the book where I outlined compatibility, I made sure to not enroll in the binary of good or bad compatibility. I believe every single zodiac sign is compatible. So do you.
So do we.
Right.
Absolutely.
That was a model set forth by you. And it was deeply inspiring to me because I did just sort of know, as most of you probably feel as well, that when we reduce compatibility to good or bad, it feels really reductionistic. And we know that relationships are more enlightened than that. And so in Queer Cosmos, I tried to speak on which zodiac sign is a little bit more fluent with love, is a little bit more comfortable with desire. How do we increase distance? How do we increase closeness? How do we negotiate this space? How do we minimize this space? How do we expand it? And these are, again, are all things and practices and words that we need to start being fluent with to make our relationship survive and to allow the North Node and Gemini to work its alchemy.
Nice. Now, one thing Colin and I have in common on that note is that we are both twins. We're both twins. We both have twin sisters.
That's right. That's right. Who are both not here, and we miss them.
They both live, we live in New York and our twins live in other
elsewhere.
states. But
It's
they
not
seem to kind of
acceptable.
visit at the same time, which is a
true.
funny thing between
true.
us. But I like to say as a twin, you're born married or born in relationship. I mean, you're in relationship in the womb. So
Yes,
it's
yes.
no
Womb mate.
surprise. Womb mates, exactly. So it's no surprise that that's a lifelong interest
Yes.
for both of us.
And I want to
Relationship.
celebrate something for you as well, if I may.
Yeah.
So in your book, How to Get Along with Everyone, The Secrets to Compatibility, okay? So in their introduction, they had written, Ophi and Tali had written that because they're twins, they are lifelong students of interpersonal dynamics. I will never forget the first time I read that.
I forgot that I wrote
Yeah,
that. Thanks
no.
for reminding me.
Let me remind you, because it was the first time that I went, oh, I didn't even know that that's what twins are indoctrinated into.
Yeah.
And you have always infused your work and your practices in terms of allowing your readers and clients to understand that the quality of our relationships determines the quality of our life.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that you have in your work, and it's a legacy that I think you should be really proud of.
Okay, well, thanks. I mean, I'll take it. But
You should.
Back to Esther Perel, whose work I've read over the years too, with her first book, Mating in Captivity, that a Gemini friend of mine went on
no
one
way.
date, became friends.
And they gave it to you?
He mentioned it, and
Oh,
so
amazing.
what
knew
we're
that.
going to talk about is this paradox,
Yes.
right? That relationships are, that we want these dueling things,
Right.
and how do we find them with one person? We want all this freedom, but we also want to feel intimate and close
Right.
and bonded.
Right.
So, but if we have too much of one or not enough of the other, we're constantly going back and forth. So there's, as astrologers, we're so often, people come to us seeking relationship advice. I'd say it's the number one, I mean, they may come for a career on the surface, but it always, and let me ask you about this one person, or let me
Right,
ask
I
you about
know.
my partner,
Yeah.
or let me,
Yep.
and it's just, it's become so clear to me that we have this one-size-fits-all model of relationships that does not work for anyone anymore. And I think astrology does help to break that up, because
Correct.
when you do your birth chart, and if you're one of our watchers, viewers who is new to astrology and you've never done your birth chart, highly recommend doing that. You can do a free one on astrostyle.com or all over the place now. And learning the whole map to your, where all your planets are, the whole map of yourself, because we are all designed perfectly and uniquely, but we're given this one model. And
Yes.
for you as a member of the queer community, that model doesn't fit
No.
and never has and never will. So it's an advantage and a disadvantage in all these ways.
Yes, and I think what's amazing about being a part of outside of majority culture as a queer identified person is that we knew as soon as we came out of the closet that those social norms would not apply to our experiences. So we were kind of given our own permission slip to rewrite our own rules and norms related to intimacy, related to sexual practices, related to relational configurations and everything that you're saying, because I think the model that you're saying that's no longer serving is that we expect one special person to provide to us when an entire village of people used to provide.
Yeah,
And that's
well,
the
that's
Esther
true.
Perel's work as well.
That is really true.
And
women used to spend 20 hours a day with other women getting the bonding hormone oxytocin from.
I love that you know
Yeah.
hormones. You bring it up all the time. I love it.
obsessed with
No, I
that.
love it. I'm obsessed
Yeah.
with hormones. Go ahead. Gemini Sag, I'm telling you. Go ahead. Oxytocin,
I am
the
obsessed
bonding.
with vitamin O, as I like to
Yes.
call oxytocin. And
love it.
so
I
what
love
you're
it.
saying is that we're now, it's so true. I mean, I'm married to a man. I have a child. I was born in the 1970s. So, and you were born at the very end of the late 80s. So we come from, I'm Generation X.
Right.
You're
Millennial.
millennial, tipping into the Z.
Yeah.
And so, but yet, people my age are still also really wanting the things that you
Yes.
are talking about
Yes.
more now.
Because I think
So-
what happens is back to the negotiation and really reconfiguring relational renovation is that we expect one special person to be our passionate lover, our life coach, our co-parent, our financial advisor, our recreational partner, inspire me, comfort me, secure me, play with me, love me, and it's just a tall order for one person. And I think what we need to remember, and this is very much a queer kind of concept, because not only do we speak on chosen family, but we've always been given permission in our own community to get our emotional needs met outside of the traditional confines of a romantic relationship. Meaning, go as deep as you can with as many people as you can under certain guidelines of appropriateness, and then you won't come to your romantic partner with an emotional deficit because you've been getting deposits in your emotional bank account all day.
Right. don't starve yourself all day, then come to the table. Don't go grocery shopping hungry.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yes, exactly. And then also too, I think why this relates to Gemini is because this is the sign that knows how to talk to a lot of people at once. And this is the sign that kind of keeps it light, keeps it easy. There's so much pressure on relationships these days. And because the North Node is moving into Gemini, it's kind of a real vague, you know what, lighten up everybody. It's not that serious. Relax, fall into agility, fall into play, fall into seduction, fall into mystery, fall into creativity. And then that energy makes you a little bit more attractive, a little bit more magnetic. People want to talk to you, you want to talk to other people, and that's what expands your network of people, your village, your community. And you're just overflowing with so much emotional nourishment that when you're full, you meet somebody else who's full and you're like, hey, you want to play?
Yeah.
Rather than this energy of desperation that never works. And we have the emotional scars to prove it.
Well, let's look at the landscape that 2020 is going to start out with, because it's the Gemini energy is light and playful. It's an air sign. It's relational. It's communicative, but it's against the backdrop of
a lot of
Capricorn and Earth energy. So we've got, we're starting. I mean, the North Node. It's in May. It goes to Gemini, but we're starting the year with the North Node in Cancer, which is about that bonding and neediness, kind of, and belonging, and with the Jupiter, the South Node, Saturn, Pluto, and Capricorn, which is very traditional. So, but Pluto and Saturn coming together in January could. It's going to be, I think, symbolic of some of the breakup of. Because we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Correct.
There are, reinventing relationships may not necessarily have to mean that you throw out all traditions or things that work, but that you get to play in whatever sandbox you want to. Right?
Absolutely, and you're absolutely right. And that's why we speak on often that we still need security and the anchor, right? So in every relationship, we're secretly longing for a person to be the anchor and the wave, right? So Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, these are energies that keep us secure and anchored with others. And that means that we need to be consistent, reliable, emotionally self-composed, dependable, accountable, and integrity-driven. And these are values that we speak on often and share on Instagram. But how do we really practice
Live, laugh, love.
Right, pfft, not on my fucking watch, okay? If you're not really walking your talk, you need to get to stepping, or you just need to learn to actually follow through and demonstrate trust given and received, right? So you're absolutely right. That anchor of security is essential. It's the foundation of a loving relationship. And then we also need longing, distance, mystery, anticipation, excitement, adventure, freedom, and all these things, because that's where relationships are moving. We need to learn how to balance both.
So how do we do that? Let's talk about how, because that all sounds great. Right. Like when we all like someone that we know will be there, but kind of leaves us longing a little bit too. Right. Like that's having been in relationships for, 30 years of my life at least now, it's like, I remember I always would have this 7-month time where I'd be like, it's exciting, the honeymoon, and then you hit the 7-month anniversary, and it's like, boredom is setting in.
Right.
The Sagittarius eyes are starting to wander. This is when I was younger.
This was this morning.
I had to wander around a lot. I was younger this morning. My birthday was yesterday.
That's true. Good point. Sorry. Yeah, right. Sorry.
I plead no contest to that.
But the how.
But yeah, how do we, and you mention shame a lot in your work. You talk about that. So what would you tell someone who's like, all right, I'm committed to being with someone. We've been together 20 years. But the mystery isn't there. Right. And I don't know that I can't invent a mystery. Right. It's all, this person doesn't have any mystery.
Oh, I have so many things to say to that. Okay, so number one, we want to know that even if you've been married with someone for 20 years, at best, this marital partner is on loan to you with an option to renew. So don't kid yourself, you don't have anybody. Okay? Because you could get divorced and drop them like a bad habit tomorrow. You don't have anybody. They're on loan to you.
This person is a library book, not part of your permanent collection.
Thank you.
How about that?
Oh, I love it, Sab. See that? The continuation, and they say this energy is actually incompatible polarity. Where? Anyway, so that's that. And related to shame and how we can invoke mystery. So this is really fascinating. When researchers are studying trauma, so shame, trauma, very similar ideas, they actually have to look at one's capacity for eroticism and sensuality on the other side of the continuum. Because in Esther Perel's work and a lot of research, they say that the erotic, the full-blown seduction and vitality and sensuality and intimacy between another, is the antidote to shame and trauma and death.
How does that work?
How does that work? So
I'm going to ask the hard
no,
questions.
please. No, I
the
like this,
sad
right? Because I'm
questions.
keeping a very big picture. Let me
bring it on down.
Bring it down.
Bring it on down.
So this has actually been researched by survivors of the Holocaust.
Really?
And yes, and this is also spoken in Esther's work in that in most of the survivors who were liberated after the Nazi evacuation, what they saw was that there were many people who were staying in shame and trauma and living their life tethered to the ground. Because they couldn't actually expand because they were waiting for another invasion, another person coming. They were still in their shame and their trauma. And then there were people who were not dead, and then there were those who were brought back to life. And those who consciously chose to invite creativity, longing, anticipation, mystery, warmth, and imagination back into their life were brought back to life, okay? So what we're saying here is that a crisis of seduction and chemistry in a relationship is usually a crisis of imagination, because the imagination is the central organizing agent in eroticism and intimacy. And when you're in shame and fear and trauma, you can't let yourself go to imagine another possibility because you're so contracted and tethered to the ground that there's no way that you can imagine a mystery, but you can. And that is called developing shame resilience through a lot of different methods that we can explore. And then also knowing that sexuality can be transformed through the imagination by our ability to imagine the fact that this person really is not ours. That's why I said in the very beginning, oh, no, honey, you may have them for 20 years, but you've never had them to begin with, and you still don't now, and you never will.
It's an interesting context. I find that, what does keep a relationship sort of thriving. I mean, when I met my husband, he said to me, like, you don't owe me anything, and I don't owe you anything. And I think that's probably why I married him, because it was like, because there was no sense of obligation laid upon me, it could feel like a choice. It's like, okay. So I'm constantly choosing the relationship instead of like, well, I said these vows and I got this ring, so therefore I'll show up I mean, for some people that's what it takes. But okay, so what I think I hear you saying, and this is an interesting thing that will fit with the stars of 2020, being about tradition and integrity, but also imagination. And progression. And reinvention and new ideas. So what I think I hear you saying is that when we have some breakup trauma or unresolved fear, we're going to contract and control and try to avoid the reliving of that. Which shuts down the imagination and the creativity. And blocks us from feeling that erotic flow, which is really life force energy, being alive, being open to the unknown. That requires trust. And with the North Node being in Cancer until May, I think there's a lot of self-protectiveness that's going to be worked through. Where are we protecting ourselves? There's a
where does the protection become annihilation?
Well, that's because as I'm saying that, I'm thinking, all right, people do want to feel safe, and that's become a big conversation.
Yes, but you're not entitled to comfort and safety. There's very little total safety in every relationship. So that's where we need to not normalize these de facto kind of illusions and conditioning in the transformational crowd.
Well,
because it doesn't always, you can get security from another human being, but you don't have total safety. And that's that Gemini paradox.
That's a very good, I want to pause you there. That's a good distinction. Because what are we coming to the table expecting another person to provide? Is it security? Is it safety? Can they provide that?
And are
is
you
it even
providing it for yourself?
Well, yeah. Are you providing it for them, for yourself, for, what is, and where what I love about the upcoming Gemini energy is Gemini is dialogue. It's a two-way street.
Yes, baby.
I find that there's so much in relationships that is not spoken aloud. It lives in monologue in your head, and you don't even realize that you're just expecting the other person to provide that
And
for
you define safety and security very differently than I do. And so the Gemini North Node allows you to have those conversations because, say, for you, it actually make me feel really secure in the relationship if I maybe got a text message from you twice a day. I've gone, oh, well, that's clear, totally.
Okay,
Whereas
so that's a great
that's
example.
not something I would need,
That's a
right?
great
But go ahead. I'm
example.
just to provide the fact that clear communication is the kindest form of communication, and because we are negotiating relational norms, when we use these words like safety and security, yes, those are values and needs, but we also then need to name to our partner what that looks like in practice, because we can give them the recipe to get along well with us.
Okay. So look, if you're entering into a relationship in 2020, especially with Venus going retrograde in Gemini too.
My Venus returned 3 times in 1 year.
Boy.
I know. Go ahead.
It's going to be a year that there's going to be a lot of talking and talking,
Which is amazing because
for some people.
I
If
know.
you're not a talker.
But I think what we want to remember though is that obviously the 4 scariest words we can hear in a sentence are "we need to talk." And because this energy is moving into Gemini, we are actually going to be tasked with alleviating our discomfort level with verbal communication. Because the fact of the matter is, we have become extremely irresponsible in our language and our communication skills, and I think that will be the Capricorn backdrop to Gemini in terms of giving us the structure and then also inspiring us to learn how to do it better. We're not born learning how to do it, make no mistake. And so there's plenty of research and literature and services out there for each and every one of us to learn how to be clearer, how to be more specific, how to listen carefully, how to learn the ethics of communication, because a lot of people think, oh, just because I'm ready to talk means you're ready to listen. No, it does not. We need to learn how to be more clear. We need to learn how to not over-talk, which leads to under-listening. There are so many practices that we can study while the North Node is in Gemini so we can have the structure and the integrity of communication and thus hold ourselves to a higher standard, because we shouldn't coddle those wounds.
One of the writers I like a lot is Helen Fisher, who I believe is a Gemini.
Oh,
and
no
I think a twin also.
Oh, God.
And she has the book is called, I'll remember.
Yes. We'll put it in the show notes.
Why We Love.
Yes. I love that it's a why, too. It's not how, where, when. Right?
And she had, and she's a neuroscientist, and there was a part of the book where she talks about something called breakup or abandonment rage, where if you actually see the person regularly that you've broken up with, it will trigger a whole flood of responses
Without a
and
doubt.
chemicals. So one of the, maybe we go into some tips here for navigating the year. One of them is you can't outsmart your brain. You can't outsmart the firing neurons.
Yes.
It's sometimes those, you can unpattern or repattern yourself, but it takes a lot of time and practice and repetition. So, when you are going into this, when you are trying to create a new paradigm for relationships, expect to be scared and freaked out and totally out of your comfort zone.
But that's where the excitement and the passion comes from.
It does, eventually.
Right.
Eventually.
They exist.
Fear.
They coexist
sexy.
side by side. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Please.
But to the tips and tools related to how to navigate that.
How to navigate that is really to and if you, to what I was saying about Helen Fisher's work, if you've broken up with someone and you want to move on, try not to see them for a while. We always think, oh, we're so progressive, we'll just consciously uncouple and move into being friends.
No.
That works for some people if you really both are there. But if one of you is devastated and it's and we're still living together, and I see them at the grocery store, or we still go to the same yoga class because we're both trying to be so civilized. You can still go here, it's okay. But I want the 4:00. Well, I do too. Okay, see you there. I've never had that breakup, but I'm just kind of thinking that's a 2020 breakup,
Right.
The unbreakup.
I'm going to mute them on Instagram so I don't see their posts.
Right.
Very 2020.
But you know what? I know we're kind of poking fun, but I do want to give humanity credit here. We are all trying to be better people.
We are.
And to be evolved, but like I said, at the same time, we can't outsmart our minds and our brains. So we have to give ourselves that space with the Gemini North Node coming in to know what we think and what we want and what we need. We may not have the words right away. Capricorn is about the wisdom of time. So giving yourself the time to know what you want to say before you just talk. Sometimes talking is not the same thing as communicating. Right?
Beautiful.
Right.
And I will say this related to shame resilience too, and I'll lean on the research by Dr. Brene Brown, of course, because she is an expert in the field of shame, is that the first thing you're going to want to do when you realize you're emotionally compromised, when you realize you're in shame, you've been
How do you realize you're in shame?
Physiological responses, actually.
Let's talk about shame.
Yes.
I'm so ashamed of my shame, I don't even deal with it.
Well, shame is the universal emotion that says that for something I am or something I did or because of what I am therefore fundamentally unworthy of love and belonging. So that's the definition of shame. And then it is an emotion as well that triggers physiological responses within us. So for many of us, that'll feel like time is slowing down, like we're getting a cold feeling in our armpits, we can't pay attention, we automatically have brain fog. You know you've been there, trust you me, right? And when shame has gotten you emotionally compromised, and shame is the single greatest barrier between ourselves and connection, which is why we need to learn it and name it and develop resilience around it, then the first thing you want to do is just identify that it's there. Right? Because then you acknowledge, I'm not built for human consumption at this moment, so we're not going to do the 3 T's, which is type, text, or talk. None of it. Don't do it. Because you're telling yourself conspiracy, you're in rage, you're in anger. So just acknowledge, I'm in shame. I'm not in guilt or in embarrassment, which is a temporary discomfort. I am in shame, and I am reenacting my survival mode. Okay? So you can do a couple of things from there. Shame activates the limbic system, which is the part of the brain that's the reptilian brain, and activates fight, flight, freeze, okay? So then the neocortex part of the brain, which produces critical thinking, goes offline. And so what you can do very simply is just this.
Yeah.
It really does. Tapping your neocortex gets that executive center back so you can make intelligence decisions.
So if you see someone doing this,
you know they're in shame and go, me too, sister, right? I've been there. Let me tell you something, right? The moon is in my 12th house. I'm there with you. So then you get the neocortex back, and then North Node in Gemini, you reach out and you share your shame story with someone who has earned the right to hear it. So these are people who have demonstrated qualified empathy in the past, and when you call them, you say very clearly, hi, Ophi. So glad you answered. I'm in the middle of a shame storm right now. Do you have about 10, 15 minutes?
I want that call.
Right? I know. And you would take it. Yes, of course. So I need about 10, 15 minutes where I can just say this. Is that okay?
Shame storm.
And you go, okay. Or you could go, actually, Colin, Jupiter just entered Capricorn. I'm in the middle of a lot right now. I'll get right back to you. But she's one of my closest friends. So of course she'd say, yes. I'm
Hold on. Let me put on my protective gear.
Yeah, I'm going in with you, baby. Right? So then I share my shame story, and because Ophi has demonstrated qualified empathy to me in the past, and empathy is the antidote to shame.
Empathy.
Right, because a lot of people in their best efforts to connect with you when you're in shame accidentally exacerbate it. And they do that by one-upping. They do that by inserting themselves in a story they don't belong in.
Like, hold on, let me interrupt your shame storm with one of my own.
Yeah, because I had a terrible day.
That happened
and then
to
it goes,
me.
and then it's no, I just need to get this out. And a lot of people just accidentally steamroll the conversation, and then the speaker feels abandoned, and shame actually gets exacerbated in the research.
Can I raise you a shame storm without shaming you?
Yes, and that's and people do it all the time. They do it all the time, right?
But how about having, like, if you are someone who's working through that kind of thing, so just to kind of recap this, if you are going to try to, bring yourself back to life.
Yeah.
If you're a romantic zombie, a rom-zom, if you're in rom-zom mode, and you want to bring back the magic and the life force energy, you're probably going to be inviting a shame storm or two.
You are, and I'm thank you for bringing that up.
Because there's no way that you can wake up your whole brain or whole being without all that stuff you've been suppressing coming up. So you probably are going to want to have, when you said a qualified listener, just like people in business or mastermind groups or whatever have like an accountability buddy or something, you might want to have a listener or someone that you can
Who has
talk
made
to.
you feel better
So that you don't call
after you spoke to them.
Right, because it's like, as much as I love you, it's like, listen, I'm on a deadline, I can't. So you might, during the Gemini North Node period, starting in May, you may want to just actually formally create that kind of relationship of someone to clear that stuff with.
And that's
your
the twin
listener.
part, right?
We know this as a twin.
Right.
And, but here's the thing, as a twin, it's very easy. When you have that one person that you feel understands you so well, this is something I learned this year with my twin, you don't want to just over-rely on them or assume that you can just cut to storm, you know?
Right. And that's why you ask first.
Right.
That's why when I called Ophi, I said, do you have 15 minutes? Because if she
Right.
said no, I would have been like, okay, but she knew that I was in shame,
Maybe
so
have a
that would
list.
imply a certain level of urgency, so she knows that this isn't guilt, embarrassment, or let me tell you about my, no good, dirty, rotten, bad day. It's, oh no, Colin's feeling a lethal emotion, and because we are friends, I have a responsibility to help him.
And,
right?
and on that note, that's another thing. A lot of us talk around that shame. I believe that's what is really there. When we talk about, like when you have the friend that keeps talking about that person over and over again and is like, that person that you never want to be, who keeps talking about the guy or the girl or the whoever, that keeps just messing with their head and and you're like, are you talking about them again? Oh God. Because they're really not saying something. And you kind of, and then you want to like stop the bleeding by being like, just dump them or whatever. But that doesn't help either.
Because we don't live with the consequences.
Right.
Whereas they do. And I think it's important in Gemini North Node fashion to really actually make this a semantics issue. Because there's one thing when you're in uncertainty, there's one thing when you're in guilt, there's one thing when you're in embarrassment, there's one thing when you're in shame, and really saying and naming it, it just inspires other people to rise to a certain level of cognition and occasion so they know, oh wow, somebody is not doing too well, let me tend to them, provide them with empathy, and because empathy is the antidote to shame, that's how you get them back on the emotional feet, and then they're not going to be in the
empathy. There's not a lot of empathy going on. There's a lot of actually hiding. There's a lot of people
hiding,
being
hijacking,
shamed
and inserting.
for having shame.
Right.
Like, let's take that one, in terms of if we are going to reinvent the landscape of what relationships could, we can change the way we relate, but if we're doing it in the same fishbowl where the water needs to be changed, we need to change the water in the fishbowl. And that's an opportunity in 2020 with the Gemini North Node. Like, great, we're two healthy fish swimming in a fishbowl that needs to be cleaned. The cleaning of the water involves new practices, like, okay, my friend is talking around something or sounds like they're hooked on some player or jerk or whatever, but what are they really saying? What's really going on with them? Instead of lecturing them or blah, 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 you're worth more than that.
Right.
It's like, no, that doesn't help.
No, it doesn't.
And I know, I live part of my life, now that I'm a parent, in a community where there are a lot of other parents and married couples and that kind of thing. And it's just, there's this standard or this everybody wants to talk about everybody else's relationship or partnership. And it's just, and it feels very unsafe. Like,
And you should never get empathy from any of them.
Right.
Because if they're telling you information that's not theirs to share, they're not safe or probably qualified empathy providers.
Right. So this is like, for people out there who are watching who are parents, you also need a special set of, maybe a special community or listener too, because I've seen, a couple people's relationships break up and they had kids and they were in the community and it's very public and there's a lot of, and everybody who's like, doesn't want the shame on them, like makes that person into kind of the scapegoat. Like everything they never want anyone to know about them, they kind of project onto the person who's struggling. And
And I'll just say this too, to really kind of ground the conversation.
Yeah.
Shame is universal.
Yeah.
Everybody has it. So we should not be feeling shame about having shame because we all have it. So why are we feeling guilty? And the less we talk about it, the more we have it. Whereas the more we share it in qualified containers of emotional facilitation, the more we develop resilience. And shame cannot survive when it's spoken. And that's that North Node in Gemini. Wrap language around shame with people and it has released its chokehold on you.
Yeah. Well, as the astrologer, I'm known now in that part of my life as someone, and so people do open up to me.
Oh, yeah.
And I take extra precautions to say, whatever you tell me is confidential. Please know that. And number two, we're all going through that, because
Yes.
so be the person that provides safety for others. If someone does open up to you, they're struggling, and keep your word. Like, be in this Gemini North Node, it's about reciprocity. Be for others the way you would want them to be for you. If you were the one going through the public embarrassment or of a breakup or a time of uncertainty or trying to bring passion back to your life in some way and things getting messy. Like, instead of taking the position of judging, see how you can have empathy.
Just witness, and that's the Gemini mirroring. It's just witness and validate, and know that you're not above anything that you're seeing. Right, let's be very clear. You too, if you're living bravely and courageously, you will make a mistake, you will show your ass, you will have experiences
at any
of shame.
age.
Yeah, no matter
18,
what. So we're all swimming
50,
in the same soup
80,
together, which is very Gemini, right?
We're all figuring this relationship thing out. Kind of historically, contextually, like, really, people haven't been going to therapists or even having these conversations for more than probably 30 years or 30, 40 years max. I mean, I'm from the generation, my parents are baby boomers. They didn't talk about any of that. No. And so understanding and having compassion for people, like, maybe they don't have that, but you're so lucky at your age that you actually have these tools, and the people talk about this stuff.
No,
like, it's
I really
normal.
am. And not only am I lucky to have that inclusion, but it was actually practiced in the home, which really I understand.
For people still.
That gave me a head start, and that's why I'm really committed to making sure that I'm operationalizing that proximity to this information by doing my best to share it with others without any resistances, any barriers, any financial limitations. I want to give this information away to others so that they can use it in their lives.
So if you are, looking to be in any kind of a relationship in 2020, which I believe we are all in relationship to each other at all times. That's another kind of thing to be aware of. Like, what is a relationship? Like, it's like we look at, like you said at the start, there's one big special relationship and everyone else is kind of just a
insignificant
floating, just no, we're all related to each other in some ways. So how do we want that flow, that current of energy to go? That's something that is going to be just tuning your awareness into that in 2020.
Yeah, and also having the communication skills to do that, because we need to
We're
experience
learning them.
and learn it, right? Because that's really where we're going to let the rubber meet the road.
Yeah, because we can tell you as astrologers till the cows come home who you'll be compatible with. Oh, you'll get along with, you're an Aries, you should be with a Leo or this or that. Like, that's the beginning of the conversation. You can be with anyone, but you can also screw up a relationship with anyone, even someone whose chart is perfectly matched to yours.
That's right, free will reigns.
Yeah, if you lean back too far and let go of the wheel and put it on coast or cruise control for too long.
Right. If you leave the reception desk, I don't want to know why you're surprised that your relationship isn't working.
Right. So this is not to make anyone wrong. We all have a lot of responsibilities to tend to.
Yes.
We hope our relationships can, maintain themselves without us constantly hovering over them.
No,
but
that's true.
it's going to be an interesting year for the care and feeding of relationships and having the conversations that are not necessarily easy. Going there, testing those waters.
That's right.
Knowing you might get a reaction at first. It's scary.
But necessary for a meaningful life. I mean, we are all adults here, so we need to put our big girl and big boy pants on and get to work.
Because the opposite node, and the nodes are the karmic path we're all walking. We have the Sagittarius South Node, which is about telling the truth and nothing but the truth. And then moving to Gemini, which is cultivating those communication skills and not just telling the truth like in a crude way that that doesn't take the other person into consideration, but
Yes,
really.
yes, yeah. And all of these things might sound like lofty, abstract ideas and principles, but the sooner we wrap our heads around the fact that we have to develop the skills to cultivate how to do them, then you will see the quality and the tenor of your relationships change.
Yeah, so here's wishing you a new and evolved relationships in the new decade in 2020. And Colin, where can people find you?
They can find me at queercosmos.com, and that's queercosmos.com. And that's also the name of all my social media handles as well. And I do natal chart readings and horoscopes, and I have a few books out, and we could talk about a bunch of things related to your astrology and your life together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thanks for
Thank you. Speaking of relationships, thank you for having me. And may 2020 be your best year yet.